The transport ship docked at Station Helix 9 with a soft thud. Katie Morrison grabbed her bag and walked down the ramp into the largest military station she had ever seen. The ceiling stretched so high that clouds actually formed near the top. Thousands of aliens moved through the massive halls, most of them species she had only seen in training videos. She was one of only 4 humans on the station. The Galactic Coalition had finally agreed to let human soldiers train alongside their elite forces. It was supposed to be a great honor. Katie did not feel very honored as she walked toward the training barracks. The Valkyrie were waiting for her. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with hard shells covering their bodies like armor. Each one had 4 arms and large compound eyes that seemed to look in every direction at once. They were the best snipers in 12 star systems. Their neural implants could calculate bullet trajectories faster than any computer Katie had ever used. They had won more battles than she could count, and they thought humans were a joke. This is the human? One of them clicked. Katie's translator implant turned their sounds into words she could understand. She is so small. How does she even carry a rifle? Their species is very weak, another one said. I read that they cannot even see in the dark. They have only 2 arms. They must sleep for 8 hours every single day, or their bodies stop working properly. Katie kept her face calm. She had expected this. Her commanding officer back on Earth had warned her that the Valkyrie did not want humans in their program. The Coalition had forced them to accept at least 1 human trainee. Katie was that human. Sergeant Crixville stepped forward. He was older than the others, with scars across his shell from battles fought long before Katie was born. His compound eyes studied her carefully. Private Morrison, he said, you will train with Unit 7. Your bunk is at the end of the hall. Training begins at first light. Yes, Sergeant, Katie said. She walked past the watching Valkyrie without looking at them. She could feel their eyes on her back. She could hear their clicking laughter. She did not react. Her bunk was a small metal bed in a room designed for someone much larger. The ceiling was too high. The bed was too long. Everything reminded her that she did not belong here. Katie sat down and opened her bag. Inside was her rifle, a human-made weapon that the Valkyrie considered ancient technology. It had no neural link. It had no auto-targeting system. It was just metal and glass and her own 2 hands. She cleaned it carefully, checking every part. This rifle had been her father's, and his father's before him. 3 generations of Morrisons had carried it. 3 generations had learned to shoot with patience and skill instead of fancy technology. The next morning, Katie stood on the firing range with 12 Valkyrie recruits. The targets were holographic figures that appeared at different distances, some as far as 3 kilometers away. The Valkyrie recruits finished their qualification rounds quickly. Their neural implants fed targeting data directly into their brains. They barely had to aim. They just looked, their implants calculated. And they fired, one after another. Their shots hit perfectly. Then it was Katie's turn. She raised her rifle and did something that made every Valkyrie in the room go silent. She closed her eyes. What is she doing? Someone whispered. Katie's breathing slowed. Her heartbeat dropped. She stood completely still for nearly 30 seconds. The Valkyrie watched with confusion. Their implants could calculate a shot in less than 1 second. Why was she taking so long? She was not calculating. She was feeling. She was sensing the air movement in the room, the temperature, the slight vibration of the station around her. She was building a picture in her mind, layer by layer. Then she fired. The shot missed by 2 meters. The laughter that followed was loud and long. The Valkyrie did not try to hide their amusement. Some of them bent over, their mandibles clicking with joy. Even Sergeant Crixville looked away, his compound eyes showing what might have been disappointment. Katie lowered her rifle. She did not explain herself. She did not make excuses. She simply waited for the next round. She missed that one too. Over the next several weeks, Katie consistently finished last in every assessment. Her reaction times were 4 times slower than the Valkyrie. Her accuracy scores barely passed the minimum requirements. The other recruits stopped laughing at her because she was no longer worth their attention. She was simply the human, the slow one, the primitive. But Katie did not give up. Every night, after official training ended, she went back to the range alone. She practiced for hours in the darkness when no one was watching. She studied the station's environmental systems, learning how air flowed through different sections. She read everything she could find about Nexus 7, the moon where the final qualification exercise would take place. Sergeant Cricksville sometimes watched her from the shadows. He never said anything, but he noticed things the other instructors missed. He noticed that Katie never made the same mistake twice. He noticed that her breathing patterns were unlike anything he had ever seen. He noticed that when she finally did hit her targets, she hit them in exactly the right spot, every time. One night, he approached her. "Private Morrison," he said, "why do you close your eyes before you shoot?" Katie finished cleaning her rifle before she answered. "Because I am not just looking at the target, Sergeant. I am looking at everything between me and the target. The air, the distance, the way the bullet will travel. I cannot do that with my eyes open. There is too much to see." Cricksville was quiet for a long moment. His species had used neural implants for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to calculate without technology. He was not sure he understood what she was describing, but something about her words made him curious. "The commander wants to remove you from the program," he said finally. "You have 2 weeks until the final assessment. If you do not pass, you will be transferred to support roles." Katie nodded. "I understand, Sergeant. Do you believe you can pass?" She looked at him directly, something most humans found difficult to do with the Valkyrie. "I believe that your assessments are measuring the wrong things." Cricksville clicked his mandibles in what might have been surprise or amusement. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Katie alone with her ancient rifle and her strange human patience. She went back to practicing. She had 2 weeks to prove that sometimes slow was not the same as weak. Commander Dexenol sat behind his desk, reviewing the training reports on his display screen. His office was cold, the way Valkyrie preferred it. The walls were decorated with medals and weapons from campaigns that had shaped the galaxy. He had commanded this training facility for 40 years. He had never failed to produce the best snipers in the Coalition until now. "Sergeant Cricksville," he said without looking up, "explain to me why this human is still in my program." Cricksville stood at attention. "Coalition Directive, Commander. We must maintain at least one human representative through the full training cycle. It is part of the integration agreement. I am aware of the political situation." The commander finally looked up, his compound eyes reflecting the harsh lighting. "What I want to know is why she remains in active training instead of being quietly moved to observation status." "Sir, I believe there may be more to her abilities than our standard assessments show. Her scores are the lowest in the program's history. Her reaction time is embarrassing. She takes 30 times longer to acquire a target than our weakest recruit. In actual combat, her entire unit would be killed before she managed to fire a single shot." "I understand, Commander. However, during independent practice sessions, I have observed unusual patterns in her methodology." Commander Daxonol leaned back in his chair. His mandibles clicked slowly, a sign of frustration. Unusual patterns do not win battles. Results win battles. She produces no results. With respect, sir, perhaps our testing methods are not designed to capture what she is capable of. Our testing methods have produced the finest. Soldiers in 12 star systems for over 300 years. The commander's voice was sharp. One slow human does not mean our methods are flawed. It means she is not suited for this work. He turned back to his display screen. She has 2 weeks. If she cannot pass the final assessment, she will be transferred to supply logistics. The coalition's gesture of goodwill will have been satisfied, and we can return to training real soldiers. Crixwell saluted and left the office. He did not agree with the commander, but he also could not explain why. Something about Katie Morrison bothered him. Not in a bad way. In a way that suggested he was missing something important. That evening, Katie sat alone in the observation deck, watching ships come and go from the station's docking bays. The stars beyond were thick and bright, more stars than anyone could ever count. She had traveled 47 light years from Earth to reach this place. 47 light years from everything she knew. Her datapad showed her scores in harsh red numbers. Reaction time, failed. Accuracy under pressure, barely passed. Target acquisition speed, failed. Overall ranking, last place. Specialist Gary Palmer found her there. He was one of 3 humans assigned to non-combat roles on Station Helix 9. He worked in communications, monitoring signals from across coalition space. It was important work, but it was not what he had dreamed of doing when he joined the military. "Heard about the commander's deadline," he said, sitting down beside her. "News travels fast around here." The Valkyrie love to gossip. They think humans cannot understand their clicking language, but we have pretty good translators now. Katie did not respond. "You could request a transfer," Gary continued. "Supply logistics is not exciting, but at least you would not have those giant bugs looking down on you every day. You could just do your job and go home when your service is finished. I did not travel 47 light years to count cargo containers." "Katie, I have seen your scores. I am not trying to be mean, but what exactly do you think is going to change in 2 weeks? You have been training for months, and you are still in last place. Maybe this just is not your thing." She turned to look at him. Her eyes were calm, but something in them made Gary feel like he had said something very foolish. "They measure reaction time," she said quietly. "They measure how fast I can find a target. They measure how quickly I can pull a trigger. They measure everything except what actually matters when you are lying in the dirt 3 kilometers from your enemy, waiting for a shot that might not come for hours. Or days. And what matters then? Patience. Real patience. Not waiting for a computer to tell you when to shoot. Actually understanding what is happening around you. Feeling the wind. Knowing where the dust will move. Predicting what your target will do before they do it." She paused. The Valkyrie have forgotten how to do that. They let their implants do everything for them. They have not actually calculated a trajectory in their heads for hundreds of years. Gary stared at her. "You think you can do it better than their computers?" "Not faster. Better." She stood up, tucking her datapad under her arm. "There's a difference. The Valkyrie cannot see it because they have been relying on technology for so long. They think faster is the same as better. But when conditions get bad, when the computers cannot keep up, when the chaos is too much for any algorithm to process, that is when humans show what we can really do. How do you know that will happen during the assessment?" Katie smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who understood something that others did not. "Because the final assessment is on Nexus 7. I have been studying that moon since I left Earth. The atmosphere is unpredictable. The winds shift every few minutes. Temperature changes create visual distortion that confuses sensors." She started walking toward the door. Their implants were not designed for that kind of chaos. They will struggle. And when they do, I will be ready. Gary watched her go. He had worked with many soldiers over the years. He had seen confidence before. But this was different. This was not bravado or wishful thinking. This was someone who had done the math and knew exactly what was coming. For the first time, he wondered if the Valkyrie had made a serious mistake in dismissing her so quickly. Katie walked back to the training range. It was late, and the facility was empty. She set up her rifle and began practicing again, shot after shot in the quiet darkness. She was not trying to get faster. She was not trying to match the Valkyrie reaction times. She was building something else entirely. She was building a mental model of Nexus 7, layer by layer, until she could feel that distant moon in her mind as clearly as the floor beneath her feet. 2 weeks was not very much time, but Katie Morrison had been preparing for this moment her entire life. The transport ship descended through thin clouds toward the surface of Nexus 7. Katie looked out the window at a world of gray rock and brown dust. There were no plants here, no water, nothing but stone and wind, and a sky that changed color every few hours. This was where the final assessment would take place. 12 Valkyrie recruits and Katie were divided into 2-person sniper teams. Each team would take a position somewhere on the moon's surface. Targets would appear at various distances, some as far as 8 kilometers away. The team with the highest accuracy and the fewest mistakes would earn elite designation. Everyone else would be sent to regular units. Katie was paired with Velreth, a recruit who had made no secret of his hatred for humans. He had asked for a different partner 3 times. Each time, his request was denied. Now he stood beside her as they prepared their equipment, his mandibles clicking with barely controlled anger. "Stay out of my way, human," he said. "You will provide spotting data if you can manage it. Do not try to engage targets yourself. You will only embarrass us both." Katie did not answer. She assembled her rifle with practiced hands, checking every part. The Valkyrie carried sleek weapons with built-in targeting computers and auto-stabilization. Her rifle looked like something from a museum. Some of the recruits pointed at it and laughed. She did not care. The team spread out across the rocky landscape, each one finding a position with good sight lines. Katie and Velrath settled on a ridge overlooking a wide valley. The wind was already picking up, carrying dust that reduced visibility. "Environmental conditions are acceptable," Velrath announced, checking his implant display. "My targeting system is operating at 92% accuracy prediction. We should score well if you do not interfere." The exercise began. Targets started appearing across the valley, holographic figures that looked real enough to fool even Valkyrie eyes. Velrath fired with mechanical precision, his implant guiding every shot. One target fell, then another. His accuracy held at 94%, among the highest in the exercise. Katie watched and waited. She provided distance readings when Velrath asked for them. She did not attempt to fire. She was paying attention to something else entirely. The wind. It had been shifting for the past hour, following patterns that matched what she had studied during her weeks of preparation. The temperature was dropping. The dust was getting thicker. Soon, the conditions would change dramatically. She was right. The dust storm arrived without warning. One moment, visibility was acceptable. The next, the entire valley disappeared behind a wall of brown and gray. The wind howled so loudly that Katie could barely hear Velrath cursing beside her. "My implant cannot calculate reliable trajectories," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "The atmospheric conditions exceed standard parameters. We must wait for the storm to pass." Across the exercise area, other teams were having the same problem. The Valkyrie targeting systems had been designed for clear conditions. They could adjust for minor wind or light dust. This storm was neither minor nor light. It was chaos, Several teams scored civilian casualties as their confused systems misidentified targets. Others simply stopped firing, unwilling to risk errors that would destroy their scores. Then a new target appeared. Katie saw it first on her spotting scope, a brief flash of color through the swirling dust. It was a simulated hostile commander, the highest value target in the exercise. Distance, 8.3 kilometers. Visibility, almost zero. The target would only be visible for seconds at a time when gaps appeared in the dust. That is impossible, Velrath said. No reliable data. The shot cannot be calculated. We wait for conditions to clear. Katie was already moving. She adjusted her position on the ridge, settling her body against the cold rock. Her rifle came up to her shoulder. Her breathing slowed until it was barely there at all. "What are you doing?" Velrath demanded. "You cannot possibly make that shot. The distance alone would be difficult in perfect conditions. In this storm, it is simply not possible." Quiet. The word came out calm and flat. It was not a request. Velrath's mandibles stopped clicking. Something in her voice and the complete stillness of her body made him pay attention. Katie closed her eyes. Her mind reached out into the chaos. The storm was not random. Nothing in nature was truly random. The dust moved in patterns shaped by gravity, by temperature, by the geological vents to the east that pumped warm air into the atmosphere. She could feel those patterns now, the same way she could feel her own heartbeat. They were part of her dot. She had been building this mental model for weeks. Every night in the training range, every hour spent studying atmospheric data, every moment of patient observation was now flowing together into a single picture. She knew where the dust was thick and where it would thin. She knew how long the gaps would last. She knew exactly when to fire. Her finger found the trigger. She waited. The dust shifted. A gap began to form. Invisible to normal sight, but clear in her mind. She fired. The bullet traveled 8.3 kilometers through swirling dust and howling wind. It passed through gaps that existed for less than 2 seconds at a time. It adjusted to temperature changes that happened too fast for any computer to track. It hit the target perfectly. Velrath stared at the distant confirmation signal on his display. His compound eyes blinked several times, as if trying to clear an error from his vision. The target was down. The shot had been perfect. How? He finally managed. "Your species has no neural implants. You have no targeting computer. How did you calculate that trajectory?" Katie opened her eyes. She was breathing normally again, her heart rate already returning to baseline. "I did not calculate it," she said. "I felt it." "That is not possible. Mathematics requires understanding," Katie interrupted. "Your implants understand numbers. I understand systems, wind patterns, thermal currents, the way dust moves through thin atmosphere. I have been studying this moon since before I left Earth. I know how it breathes. I know how it moves. And I know when it will give me a clear shot." Velrath was silent for a long moment. His implant was running calculations, trying to find some explanation for what he had witnessed. It found nothing. There was no algorithm that could have predicted that shot. There was no technology that could have made it possible. There was only a human woman with an ancient rifle and 200,000 years of evolutionary patience in her blood. "The storm is clearing," Katie said, already breaking down her weapon. "We should prepare for the next targets." Velrath nodded slowly. For the first time since the exercise began, he did not look at her with contempt. He looked at her with something that might have been respect or fear. The transport ship carried them back to Station Helix 9 in silence. The Valkyrie recruits sat in their usual groups, but their conversations were quieter than before. They kept glancing at Katie, who sat alone near the back of the cabin, cleaning her rifle as if nothing unusual had happened. Word of her shot had already spread through the entire exercise force. 8.3 kilometers through a dust storm. No targeting computer. No neural implant. Just a human and her ancient weapon. Some of the Valkyrie refused to believe it. They said the sensors must have been wrong. They said she must have gotten lucky. They said there was no way a human could do what their own technology had failed to do. But the telemetry data did not lie. The shot was recorded. The trajectory was analyzed. And every analyst who reviewed it came to the same conclusion. It should have been impossible. When they arrived at the station, Katie went straight to her quarters. She was tired, and she wanted to sleep. But before she could reach her bunk, a junior officer stopped her in the hallway. "Private Morrison, Commander Dexnall wants to see you immediately." Katie followed the officer through winding corridors to the commander's office. It was late, and the station was quiet. Most of the staff had finished their shifts. But the lights in the commander's office were still burning bright. Dexnall sat behind his desk, surrounded by holographic displays showing data she did not recognize. His compound eyes tracked her as she entered and stood at attention. "Private Morrison," he said. "Sit down." Katie sat in the chair across from him. It was too large for her human body, designed for Valkyrie proportions. She felt like a child in an adult seat. "Explain your methodology," the commander said. His voice was not angry. It was curious, maybe even confused. "Sir, the shot you made. My analysts have reviewed the telemetry 17 times. They have tried to replicate your calculations using every algorithmic approach we know. They have failed. The variables were too numerous. The conditions were too chaotic. There was no reliable data for any targeting system to use." He leaned forward, his mandibles still. "Yet you did not hesitate. You did not guess. You fired with absolute certainty, and you hit your target perfectly. I need you to explain how." Katie thought about her answer for a long moment. This was the question she had been waiting for. The question that might finally make them understand. "Commander, do you know how human hunters operated before we developed projectile weapons?" Dexnall clicked his mandibles. "Ancient history. Not relevant to this discussion." "It is very relevant, sir." Katie kept her voice calm and respectful. "Before we had spears or bows, our ancestors hunted using persistence. They would find an animal and start following it. Not chasing, following. A steady walk, hour after hour, sometimes for entire days. I do not understand the purpose of such a method. The purpose was exhaustion. Most animals can run faster than humans, but they cannot maintain their pace for as long as we can. They sprint and rest, sprint and rest. Our ancestors just kept walking, steady, patient, relentless. Eventually, the prey would collapse from heat exhaustion and dehydration. And our ancestors would be there, ready." The commander's compound eyes narrowed. "This is interesting anthropology, but I still do not see the connection to marksmanship. The connection is this. Humans evolved to process complex environmental data over very long periods of time. We do not calculate trajectories the way your implants do. Your technology treats each shot as a separate mathematical problem. It gathers data, runs calculations, and produces an answer. Very fast, very precise, but also very limited." Katie paused, choosing her next words carefully. "When I closed my eyes on that ridge, I was not ignoring the chaos. I was listening to it. I was feeling how the dust moved. I was sensing where the temperature changed. I was watching patterns that had been building since the storm began. All of that information was flowing into my brain. And my brain was doing what human brains have been doing for 200,000 years. It was building a model, a complete picture of the entire system, a mental simulation, the commander said slowly. Yes, sir. Not a calculation. A feeling. Like knowing where a ball will land before it is thrown. Like sensing when someone is about to attack you. Humans call it instinct, but it is really just our brains processing more information than we are consciously aware of. Vexenol was silent for a long time. His displays continued to show data, but he was not looking at them anymore. He was looking at Katie as if seeing her for the first time. This cannot be quantified, he finally said. It cannot be standardized or replicated through technology. No, sir. It cannot. That is why your assessments kept marking me as defective. You were measuring reaction time. You were measuring speed. You were measuring things that computers do better than humans. But you were not measuring what happens when the computers fail. She met his compound eyes directly. Your implants are amazing technology. But they have limits. When conditions exceed those limits, your soldiers are helpless. They do not know how to function without their technology. They have forgotten. And humans have not forgotten? We never had the technology in the first place. We've been doing it ourselves since the beginning. We are slower. We are less precise in perfect conditions. But we do not stop working when things get chaotic. If anything, we get better. The commander leaned back in his chair. His mandibles clicked slowly, processing what she had said. You are suggesting that human soldiers have capabilities that our training program is not designed to measure or develop. Yes, yes, sir. And you believe these capabilities could be valuable to the coalition? I believe they could save lives, sir. Your soldiers are the best in the galaxy when conditions are good. But conditions are not always good. And when everything goes wrong, when the dust is blinding and the sensors are confused and there is no data to calculate with, that is when you need someone who can still function. That is when you need a human. Vexenol sat in silence for several minutes. Katie did not speak. She had said what she needed to say. Now it was up to him. Finally, the commander stood. He was so tall that his head nearly touched the ceiling. He looked down at Katie with an expression she could not read. Report to Sergeant Crixful tomorrow morning, he said. You will be assisting with a new training module. We are going to find out if what you can do can be taught. Katie stood and saluted. Yes, sir. She walked out of the office with her head held high. For the first time since arriving at Station Helix 9, she felt like she belonged here, not because she had proven herself faster or stronger or better equipped than the Valkyrie, but because she had shown them something they had forgotten sometimes. The old ways were still the best ways. 6 months had passed since the dust storm on Nexus 7. The training facility on Station Helix 9 looked the same from the outside. The same long corridors. The same massive ceilings. The same aliens moving through the halls on their way to classes and exercises. But something fundamental had changed. Katie Morrison stood at the front of Training Room 7, wearing the uniform of a coalition instructor. A patch on her shoulder showed her new rank, Specialist First Class. She was the first human to ever hold an instructor position. In the Valkyrie sniper program, in front of her sat 20 recruits. Half of them were human, soldiers who had traveled from Earth to learn skills that had never been taught before. The other half were Valkyrie volunteers, soldiers who had chosen to learn methodologies that their implants could not provide. Today, we are going to practice environmental sensing, Katie said. Her voice was calm and clear. Put away your displays. Shut down your implants. We are going to do this the old way. The human recruits nodded. They had been doing exercises like this since they arrived. The Valkyrie recruits hesitated. Shutting down their implants felt wrong, like closing their eyes in a dark room. But they had signed up for this program knowing it would be difficult. One by one, they disabled their neural links. Good, Katie said. Now close your eyes and focus on your breathing. Slow it down. Feel your heart beating. Feel the air moving in and out of your lungs. She walked among them as they practiced. Some of the Valkyrie struggled to slow their breathing. Their species naturally breathed faster than humans, and changing that rhythm felt uncomfortable. But they kept trying. Sergeant Crixville watched from the observation platform above. He had been skeptical when the commander first proposed this new training program. He had trained soldiers for decades using proven methods. The idea of teaching them to ignore their technology seemed backwards, but he could not argue with results. Since the program began, accuracy rates under adverse conditions had improved by 37% across all species. Soldiers who completed the training performed significantly better in chaotic environments. They made fewer mistakes when their implants failed. They stayed calm when everything went wrong. They had learned to think like humans. Commander Dexenal stood beside him on the platform, watching the training session below. She has transformed the program, Crixville said quietly. I've never seen anything like it. Valkyrie soldiers who have relied on implants their entire lives are now learning to function without them. They complain about it constantly, but they keep coming back because they understand the value, the commander replied. We assumed human biology was primitive. We looked at their slow reaction times and their limited senses and their constant need for sleep, and we concluded they were inferior soldiers. We failed to consider that different evolutionary pressures produce different capabilities. Not inferior, just different. A lesson that required 8.3 kilometers of dust and wind to teach us. The commander clicked his mandibles in what might have been amusement. Sometimes the most important lessons are also the most humbling. Below, Katie was now demonstrating a breathing technique to a young Valkyrie recruit named Threll. He was struggling more than the others, his forehands clenching and unclenching with frustration. I cannot do this, he said. My mind keeps reaching for data that is not there. I feel blind. That is normal, Katie told him. Your implant has been giving you information your entire life. When you shut it down, your brain does not know what to do. It feels empty. How do I fill the emptiness? Katie knelt beside him. You do not fill it. You accept it. You stop looking for answers from outside and start building them from inside. Your eyes are still working. Your ears are still working. Your skin can still feel temperature and wind. All of that information is still coming into your brain. You just need to learn how to listen to it. Threll closed his compound eyes again. His breathing slowed just a little bit. It was not perfect, but it was progress. Good, Katie said. Now hold that feeling. Remember it. The next time your implant fails, this is what you will use instead. She moved on to the next recruit, a human woman named Lisa from a small town in the middle of North America. Lisa had grown up hunting with her family, tracking deer through forests for hours at a time. She understood patience. She understood waiting. But she was struggling with the technical aspects of the program. My shot groupings are inconsistent, Lisa said. I can hit targets at close range, but anything over 2 kilometers and I start missing. Show me your breathing, Katie said. Lisa demonstrated her technique. Katie watched for a moment, then nodded. Your breathing is good, but you are rushing the final moment. Right before you pull the trigger, you are tensing up. Your body knows the shot is coming, and it is preparing for the recoil instead of staying relaxed. How do I stop doing that? Practice. Thousands of repetitions until pulling the trigger feels no different from breathing. Until the shot is just another part of the rhythm, not a separate event. Katie smiled slightly. It took me 3 years to get it right. You have been here for 6 weeks. Be patient with yourself. Lisa nodded and went back to her position. She set up her rifle and began the breathing exercises again, trying to find that perfect moment of calm. After the training session ended, Katie walked to the observation deck where she had sat alone so many months ago. The view was the same: cargo ships drifting toward docking bays, stars burning bright in the endless darkness. But she was not alone anymore. Gary Palmer found her there, just like he had before. He was still working in communications, but he visited the training facility whenever he could. "I heard the commander is expanding the program," he said. "2 more training rooms, another 30 recruits from Earth. They are building a whole new section of the station just for your curriculum." Katie nodded. "We are calling it the Integration Initiative, teaching humans and Valkyrie to work together using methods from both species. The implant technology for precision work, human instinct for chaos and uncertainty. A year ago, they laughed at you. Now, they are redesigning their entire training program around what you taught them. They are not redesigning it around me. They are redesigning it around what humans can do. I just happened to be the first one who got a chance to show them." Gary was quiet for a moment. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if that dust storm had not come? If the conditions had stayed clear?" "I think about it sometimes. I probably would have been transferred to supply logistics. I would have counted conga containers for 3 years and then gone home." Katie shrugged. "But the storm did come, and I was ready for it. That is the thing about patience. You cannot force the right moment to arrive. You can only prepare for it and wait, and hope it comes before you run out of time. That too." She looked out at the stars, thinking about all the soldiers who would go through her program. Human and Valkyrie, learning from each other, finding strength in their differences instead of seeing weakness. The galaxy was vast and dangerous. There were enemies out there that made the Valkyrie look small and weak. Wars that had lasted for centuries. Threats that no one species could face alone. But maybe, just maybe, they did not have to face them alone. Maybe the coalition was stronger than any of them realized, because somewhere in the training rooms below, a Valkyrie recruit was learning to close his eyes and breathe slowly. And a human recruit was learning to trust technology she had never used before. They were becoming something new, something that had never existed before. And Katie Morrison, the human who had been mocked for her slow breathing, was at the center of it all. She smiled and turned away from the window. There was more work to do. There was always more work to do. But for the first time in her life, she knew that her work mattered. Not just to her, not just to humanity. To everyone. And that was worth more than any medal or rank or title could ever be.